I've been working in remittances for 12, 14 years, and as an immigrant in the United States, I've felt and seen directly how hard it is to make a living, start a financial life in America or anywhere in the world when you don't have access to banking. So when I saw Bitcoin, I saw two things. I saw a huge amount of risk of financial crime, money laundering, which is a specialty that had been working for a long time, but I also saw incredible amounts of opportunity. So this is talking about bubbles and investments and volatility. This talk is going to burst your bubble a little bit, because this is the realism of what Bitcoin and any emerging technology has to face. I'm going to show you the reality of what any financial service has to face in the current world, in current environment of regulation, and what companies, entrepreneurs, any person who does financial services or intermediation for financial services has to do. It's an obligation, it's a must-do, and this is it. Right. A year ago, exactly a year ago in Rio de Janeiro, I started saying that Bitcoin was born regulated. And I had been saying that for a long time. Early on, no one believed me, but then it turned out to be true. And the reason is, by the way, I marked there something that Belen, the journalist, wrote. She said, rock and roll regulator lays down law on virtual currency. I don't know if she was referring to Ben Losky or to me, but I have no idea what she meant there, but I just noticed it last night. So the reason is that any payment mechanism that is anonymous is not accepted by the law and by regulation. That's a fact. It has been laid down in regulation for a long time, for decades even. And when something that is anonymous, that doesn't carry the identity of the user, of the owner of the asset, on both ends of the transaction, that raises questions to regulators, right? And another thing that also was written in the law was the other phrases at the top, at the bottom. Anything that can be the transmission of value in any shape or form is already considered a financial service, right? So, Bitcoin is a monetary equivalent, right? So diamonds are a monetary equivalent. Watches are monetary equivalents. If I transport watches back and forth between the US and Europe or any other market, this may be considered money laundering, money transfer. And if I do it illegally, of course, it could be money laundering. So all these things were already laid down in the law. So I've divided up my presentation in 4 parts. I'm going to try to take 5 minutes each, but I have a lot of slides that you can read at home, or not, if you don't like them. But that's the way I like to do things. So regulation today this is very basic. So the reason for regulation is to prevent losses, right? The reason for risk management is to prevent losses. Losses can happen to property, to value, and to even power. If you think about nations, regulations or embargoes or sanctions are about protecting someone's power, right? I don't want to deal with Cuba, I don't want to deal with Iran, I don't want to deal with Libya or North Korea because they're my enemies. So I want to preserve my power and crush the enemy. So it's a preservation of power, right? And so regulation is intended to do the 4 things on to prevent the 4 things on the right, right? So, in terms of regulation, it's not really visible, but I hope it was going to be. It was on my Mac. So, the 4 areas of regulation that every financial intermediary has to pay attention to. There will always be, in my opinion, grouped in these 4 groups, right? 4 categories. National security and crime and law enforcement, the fight against crime. Second, consumer protection. No one wants to, governments and we as a society want to protect ourselves from losses. So it's natural that we create structures to protect ourselves from losses, right? Then there is safety and soundness, which is the obligations of a service provider to be a well-managed company, a well-structured company, a well-capitalized company. So there's business continuity and there's really a good stability in the provision of the service. And then, of course, is taxation. We all have to fund public services, right? So taxation is a big area of regulation that is going to affect Bitcoin, and it is affecting Bitcoin too. So the first area is about national security. And I group these, the subcategories within financial, homeland security or national security and law enforcement have to do with enforcing sanctions against enemies or countries or individuals that have known to be are not desired, are blacklisted because they are criminals or terrorists. And this is happening a lot today. And then there's anti-money laundering, the countering of financing of terrorism, and now there's a new acronym, as if we didn't have enough, which is the countering the proliferation financing, which is about there's arms, weapons smuggling across the world, so we need to fight as a society to curb proliferation of weapons. And then, of course, there's any other criminal activity. We want to prevent fraud. We don't want fraud in our companies, in our society. We don't want identity theft. We don't want cybercrime. So these are natural things, groups of regulations that affect financial services. The second one is consumer protection. Transparency to the consumer, informing about pricing, about risk, about expectations about the product, right? And then there has to be a support, error resolution channels. All these things are normally regulated through in any country, right? In every country. And then safety and soundness is about the companies. Again, companies need to be well capitalized. They need to have reputable management. They need to be run by professionals. And they have to be physical security, logical security protections within the company. That's why we have IT teams, we have security teams, we have firewalls, we have disaster recovery plans, we have business continuity plans. All these things have to be with the safety and soundness of a company, right, or an institution. So how about compliance? This is my first section. I hope it was 5 minutes. Do you have any questions about this now? Any doubt? This is very general, high-level regulation. All of this affects Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, any emerging technology that does finance, that puts value at risk or property at risk. So all of these things are going to affect and are affecting what we're doing as entrepreneurs today. So but compliance is the other side, is the side of the marketplace and the consumer, mostly the marketplace and service providers, doing what the law says they have to do, right? So these are mandatory rules that we have to comply if we're going to be allowed to provide a service to our consumers, right? So, and there's two regimes in general, anywhere in the world. Depending on the level of risk, you either register with an authority, an agency in the government, you register your company, you make you aware, visible to them. I'm here, I exist, I am providing this type of service. So you register with the government. In Mexico, you register with the Comisión Nacional de Valores. In the United States, you register with FinCEN for anti-money laundering. But then there's licensing regimes for other aspects of regulation, right? So if there's a high risk of loss, financial institutions, financial products always have licensing, mostly around the world have licensing regimes, which is basically asking for permission before launching the service. So you cannot launch an app, a Tinder for finance, without asking for permission. You would be breaking the law because you're providing a service that puts value at risk, right? So these are the two regimes. Very general, but I want you to get the picture, right? So and another thing about regulation, it is activity-based and based on the jurisdiction or the residency of the consumer. So if I am providing value transfer, I may be considered a money transmitter, a value transmitter. So the category I fall under, the bucket I'm going to be dumped into is going to be money transmission. But if I also cash checks, for example, I'm also going to be a check casher. So it's the activity that dictates which type of regulation, which framework applies to me as a company, right? Another thing is because the jurisdiction of the customer. Initially in the Bitcoin world, there was a misconception that, oh yeah, I can go to Panama, I can go to Canada, I can go abroad and provide a service in the United States. Doesn't work like that. If you're servicing a United States customer from Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe company has to comply with United States regulation. Why? Because the resident the regulation in most jurisdictions does not only apply to the location of the service provider, but it applies to the location of the customer. So if you are incorporating in Hong Kong, in Singapore, if you're doing regulatory arbitrage, be careful with that, right? Another thing, this is about compliance again, the compliance section. There's two ways to approach compliance. You can be formal You can hire an expensive lawyer to provide you a 75-page manual so you comply with the law and be formal, and you can launch your business. Fine. But down the road, you're going to start having examinations, visits. Your bankers, your investors, your other stakeholders are going to look at you, and they're going to start looking at you, how you execute, how substantially good you are, right? How you play the game, right? So that is what I call substance. And my approach, probably because I'm not a lawyer, I'm trying to find a niche for myself, is start with the substance in mind. Start with building the real controls, because that is going to trump anything. And this is my own list of, I was scribbling this a couple of months ago. This is just the difference between walk and talk. It's like anything, right? You can talk all you want, right? You can deliver messages, hire PR firms, be fantastic at presenting, announce things, and then promise things. And then when someone looks at you and says, what's the value? So where's the substance? So that's what I call the talk only is a vertical axis, and the walk, which is the actual execution, which needs to be supported by resources, people, time, are the hard part, right? So if you're low on talk and low on walk, you're responsible. You shouldn't be in business. You shouldn't launch a business if you cannot market yourself, and you shouldn't be in business if you cannot implement a sound operation, right? I can think of Mt. Gox in that category for some reason. So if you're high on talk and you don't implement, you're a hypocrite. I mean, you're providing lip service. You're probably, okay, I can get attention, which is good. It's not bad. I mean, as a marketing strategy, especially today, you usually start with a message, but you don't build until you have a proof of concept or a minimum viable product, right? So it's not bad. So I consider it as a reasonable strategy, but at some point you will have to invest in your operation, in your substance. So on the lower right-hand corner, I have a lot of implementation, but no talk. And now you're missing the message. You're low on marketing. You should probably do better marketing about what you have, right? And obviously, the ideal is a culture of compliance and being very smart, because that is what's going to give you the longer sustainability, and you're going to yield the best results. So you have to talk the talk and walk the walk. That's the message. Do both. And this is my unsolicited advice to you, to entrepreneurs in general. Focus on the substance, focus on the spirit of the law. You're going to be able to launch faster. Instead of going line by line of the regulation, yeah, we have to do this, we have to do this, and take 6 years probably to launch, or 5 months. Focus on the spirit. What is this regulation intended to do? Protection consumer losses. Okay, let's protect the product, so let's build a protection so the product doesn't have that impact, right? And then I believe in holistic use of technology, data-based and technology-based compliance programs. And that's why I always recommend first hire an engineer and have the engineer do compliance for you. Don't have lawyers do compliance for you. That's my own opinion, and I can have lots of examples. For example, well, let's think about HSBC, ING, Societe Generale, BNP, billions of dollars in fines and market losses. Riggs Bank, I'm sure they had excellent lawyers. They didn't have excellent compliance. Or excellent protections, whatever the protections are, right? Okay, so I believe this is my message. I've been repeating this for a long time. Compliance, doing compliance the smart way, cost-effectively, focusing on substance and spirit, and hiring engineers, gives you a competitive advantage, gives you a good reputation. You can attract partners and investors more easily than anyone else, and it gives you a surplus on your valuation when you exit. I have gone through mergers and acquisitions. I've been on both sides of acquisitions, and when they do deep due diligence on you and they find skeletons in the closet, then you're going to get a discount on your valuation, and the investors are going to probably lose millions. Okay, so this is my message about compliance. Any questions? Very interesting, right? Okay. So enforcement, yeah. Go ahead, please.
So we're a startup now. We are launched
Yes.
And so we have one big startup, so we are actually moving money, for example. So that's something what we are looking into.
Yes.
How much time is it going to take us, and how much
Yeah.
time will it take?
Well, how much time is it going to take you to build something? Well, my job is to build minimum viable compliant products. I help companies minimum viable compliant products so that they don't get shot in midair. Because someone's going to shoot you if you grow fast without compliance. Someone's going to shoot at you. Look at Ripple, okay? Well, there's shots, there's small shots. Maybe they don't hurt you, and there's a cost of doing business, but $750,000, $1 million in an early stage is hurtful. And investors don't like that. You lose trust and credibility, right? So you have to be very smart about it. In my opinion, read, learn as much as you can. My advisees, I work with them because they already know what they have to do. It's fantastic. 22, 25-year-old entrepreneurs, they already know what they have to do. They need help on how to do it cost effectively. Okay, excellent. 10 minutes. Yeah, sorry, but well, let's do it afterwards. So this is enforcement. Enforcement is how has the world reacted to Bitcoin when it emerged, right? So, and we can have several kinds of attitudes from regulators and law enforcement. Obviously, which country do you think is the most aggressive in terms of enforcement? Who has the sharpest teeth? Or the biggest tanks and the biggest missiles? The United States of America. They have the most powerful enforcement machinery or machine that you can find in the world today. So you don't want to mess up with the United States, right? Be careful, right? So these are the attitudes that I see. You have conservative guys and you have progressive guys in usually Europe. You see very progressive guys in the UK, in Luxembourg, in some markets, in Eastern Europe, because they want to raise the value of their countries and the geographies. And Hong Kong, Singapore, these huge centers are being very progressive. Then you have other mindsets, and you always find regulators and law enforcement officers or agencies that also have this attitude of whether they're formal or substantial. Some guys check at every comma. I remember. As a compliance officer, I can tell you I have never been fined. I've been a chief compliance officer for 12 years. I never received one fine for anything. I may have received citations like, would you like to correct this? I think you should expand this paragraph. Okay, yeah, thank you so much. It's the letter of the law. Who cares? I care about providing a safe service and protect a strong operation. So some people are very particular about details, right? So this is what happened in 2003. Some of you have seen this before. I've been presenting this for 2 years now. This is my third laBITconf. So these are the three big things that happened. A friend of ours, we have the Fins and Guinas, we have the Liberty Reserve Indictment, which is an announcement. The government said, if you're providing a money service business that is anonymous, it's very easy to use it and abuse it, you're going to be in trouble, right? And that happened with Liberty Reserve in 2013. Then we have the Silk Road bust. The illegal marketplace bust in 2013. In 2014, we had our friend Charlie Shrem, who was in the first laBITconf in Buenos Aires. He's spending time in jail. So you should look at that if you want to understand why. Then we have the Mt. Gox debacle, and then we have the IRS considering Bitcoin as property in the United States. Last year, or this year actually, we had 3 events that happened clustered together around May or June. We had the FinCEN fine on Ripple, which is a closed cryptocurrency system. We had the Ross Ulbricht life conviction, life in prison, incredible. If you think if you want an example of how strong law enforcement is in the United States, that's one. And then the bid license in the United States. This is what I was telling you about earlier. These protections or obligations for service providers to have risk management infrastructures in place. So, and this is the most important part. I think this is what we as an industry should start focusing on. We should start to rethink different. Bitcoin and blockchain has made us think about how systems work, how money works. We have learned. I didn't know how money worked until I started reading about Bitcoin in 2012. So how money is created, how inflation works, this is creating an incredible amount of, it's a great opportunity to start doing all these things. Rethink about everything, including regulation. And this is what Bitcoin is doing. It's forcing us to redefine security, privacy, governance, money, identity. Bitcoin is the first system in history, electronic system in history, where value travels without identity. Think about that. Every financial service in the world today has the obligation, because of regulation, because of the fight against anonymity, to attach identity to ownership and payment. Bitcoin doesn't do that. Identity is here, ownership and payment is here, and it gets transferred. So that is change, is breaking, is causing trouble, in the current paradigm, right? So this is very wordy, but I think these are the opportunities. Today, we have a very heavy-handed law enforcement world against financial crime because of what happened in Paris, because what happened this week in San Bernardino, and all the bad things that are happening in the world, right? We have fears and we have real concerns about crazy people doing crazy things to society. But what is the downside of that? That the obligation to force people to identify themselves is causing financial exclusion. And George Salmon published something this week about, he said it openly. So what is the reason how can we improve financial inclusion? We have been having hackathons, and we're talking about financial inclusion and fintech innovation. The best way to promote financial inclusion is to change the identity paradigm. All right? And this is what I'm talking about here. Today, the identity paradigm in financial services, unexpired, government-issued, photo identification document. So every human being is forced to have all those four things, and the monopoly for identity is in the hands of the government, there's a problem there, right? So there's millions and billions of people who are not identified. Not every country has reliable identity systems. There's no guarantee that the person holding this credential is going to be a good guy or is going to be the human represented by the credential. So identity is a huge problem, that is a huge obstacle. Privacy has to be redefined, as you have heard and have learned this morning. If you lose the private key, the asset is gone forever. So the asset today, if you lose your credit card, you get a new one. If you lose your passport, you recover it. You cannot do it with Bitcoin. You lose a private key, it's like dropping an ingot of gold in the ocean. And even worse than that, because you can go with a submarine and pick it up, right? No, with Bitcoin, you cannot pick it up. It's gone. So, but there's opportunities here. I don't have time to present them now, but read them. And these are things that we, as an industry, should start thinking about, how to influence changes in regulation or paths towards incorporating these new things that are happening now, right? So security also. Security is about roles, about identity also. And security is about a perimeter control around something. But now security in an open system has to change, because it's a public ledger that is shared by everyone, is in every node and every miner. And how do you protect value? How do you protect against confidentiality or for confidentiality? So these things have to be taken into account. And multi-signature escrow and all these systems and the incredible opportunities that Bitcoin provides, which are unique to Bitcoin, have to be made digestible, have to be communicated and transformed into products that are really digestible by financial institutions, by consumers, and by governments. So this is what I think we should do. Earlier this year, I wrote a piece for Coin Center, which is a policy group in Washington that is trying to help influence regulation policy. And about one example from my own experience about how blockchain or radical transparency as provided by blockchain can help regulation and regulators and regulatees, all of us. And if we have a transparent ledger, if we have proof of solvency, proof of liquidity, if we have proof of transparent ownership, disclosure of something, and we have zero knowledge proofs, if we have the right amount of privacy and the right amount of verification with SHA-256, with hashes, whatever, why cannot we have this remote surveillance or supervision? Why do we need to have regulators in our offices and we pay the bill? I don't know if you're not familiar with how regulation works. You get examiners every 2 weeks. If you have, for example, I left my company with 32 money transfer licenses in the United States. That's 32 jurisdictions within the United States, not counting the foreign ones. So you basically probably should become an Airbnb. Your office, you put it on Airbnb so regulators can stay at your place. They live there. They really live. They stay there. And the large ones have resident regulators auditing the operation and controlling everything, slapping on the wrist. This is what happens today. This is how regulation. How come? This is the 21st century, guys. So let's go to algorithmic regulation. Let's robotize and automate our own disclosures, our own transparency, and let's have a more efficient and more transparent way of regulating ourselves. And this is what I like the most. These are people that Tim O'Reilly wrote about algorithmic regulation. He talks about the exact similar things that I've been talking about. Focus on the end. Focus on what is the goal we're trying to achieve. So what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? Consumer protection, prevention of loss, etc. Focus on that and work towards the goals. But the problem today is that everything is about the letter of the law. It has been built, there's codes, there's volumes and reams of regulation. Everyone has to read it, and you have to hire lawyers, right? So why is that an efficient system in the 21st century? We have to think about how to disrupt regulation also. That's my message here. I want you to think about that. So let's measure the impact. Let's measure the consequences of regulation. Is it being effective? So what is more important, financial inclusion or protection of financial crime? Do we want 2/3 of the world to die, or do we want to protect our walled garden? Those are things that society has to ask, right? Okay, so this is, I think, one model presented by Nick Grossman in Harvard University. Nick is an investor in Union Square Ventures in New York. But this is maybe the trade-off we as industry have to make. And he talks about, okay, give us permission to operate, give us a nice on-ramp so we can operate. So give us permission, so low barrier to entry. So permission to operate, very little work on the part of the company. But then the trade-off is transparency. Let's show the government how good we are at doing what we do. And I think that's not a bad trade-off to have. If you're really serious about adding value, creating a product of value, a service of value, changing the world, if you're not a scammer, what's the point? How difficult is it? Why wouldn't you show the quality of your operation? So let's trade up upfront permission for data-driven accountability. And the accountability is about you as a company, how you're performing, how sound your balance sheet is, how much capital you have, how long is your runway. All these things the regulators want to see because of safety and soundness concerns, right? So this is my message, the 3 I's. I've been preaching this very original concept of the 3 I's. You have to innovate, you have to implement minimum controls, and then you have to influence regulation. So, and we have to find enlightened regulators. Don't talk to people who cannot help you. Talk to people who can help you. Influence the people that can help you, right? And so this is my model. You have to innovate, the 3 I's, and this is the only way that we're going to have responsible innovation. And for the anarchists in the group or online, I found this quote from, I don't know who Dominic is, but he wrote a very good article in CoinDesk early last year. But stop fighting the government. Why do you want to insult your enemy? Why? Do it. Just do it. And make it inevitable. And I think this is what is happening in the world. Things are happening today, underground, in the shadows, and at some point, 2 things, I see 2 scenarios, and I'm writing a blog post on this. 2 Bitcoin scenarios. Bitcoin scenario number 1, regulation kills it. Regulation, as we have seen it today, law enforcement, attacks from incumbents, and is going to be killed. It's going to be crushed down by the incumbents. They're going to protect their business, the established insurance companies, just kidding, and the established rails, Visa, MasterCard, all these companies, Swift, they're fighting hard behind the scenes against Bitcoin today. right? There's a lot of agendas, right? And the other scenario is no one notices. Oh yeah, it's just a fad. These techie guys, young kids, they don't know what they're doing. And suddenly, at some point, the world switches to Bitcoin. Companies start using value transfer on the blockchain. Companies start using insurance on the blockchain. Proof of property, proof of ownership, proof of title, all of that is start being used in the blockchain. Why? Because it's safer, secure, more secure, distributed, immutable, corruption is eliminated, votes and democracy gets reinforced with blockchain, and then there's no option but to take it because it's a better option. All right? So you have to make it irresistible and inevitable. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Juan. Tenemos tiempo para 2 preguntas muy cortas, porque estamos un poco cortos de tiempo. Aquí tenemos la primera.
So you build your argument on the premise that everything that
Rational guy here.
everything that involves transferring value has to be regulated.
It's not an argument. It is regulated. It's a fact.
Okay, so but what we're seeing here with Bitcoin, it's not a network or a currency or whatever, but the possibility of people creating their own money as information. So Andres Antonopoulos built a different argument that says, this is not money, this is information, and no matter what you do to try to regulate it, we will find another way. If we encode those transactions as smiley faces and send them to through Skype or whatever, it's okay. So that's one thing. 30 seconds.
So let me answer that. That is a product-focused argument. It's a product-centered argument. So what is Bitcoin? What is a noun, right? What is thing? It's information, it's code, it's free speech. Perfect, it's an argument. But regulation today works like that. Works on what you do with that. What do you do with the token that travels from A to B? Are you moving value? Are you representing a share of stock? Are you representing a bond? Are you insuring someone's property? This is what matters in regulation, the regulatory paradigm today. Those arguments, brilliant, academic, love them. I hope to see them thrive in my lifetime.
Bueno,
Juan, la sensación es que todo está regulado ya, ¿no? Pero también está esta cuestión de que la regulación va atrás de la tecnología. Sí, o sea, primero viene la tecnología, los cambios tecnológicos, las disrupciones, y después viene la regulación. Y vos decís, o sea, que hay un grupo de gente que es startup en una industria eventualmente disruptiva, ¿sí? Y sin embargo das la sensación, al principio del mensaje, no al final, que lo levantas. Muy bien.
Bueno, yo le dije que le iba a romper la burbuja.
Pero al principio del mensaje nos queda un poco la sensación de sé que estás en una cosa disruptiva, que yo sé cuánto, pero todo está regulado y entonces me queda un poco ahí el...
Okay, bueno, o sea, es verdad, bueno, English or Spanish?
Como vos quieras.
So the question is, he feels that I presented a picture, kind of grim picture of everything being regulated, so you cannot move. So, I was in Money 2020 in Vegas last month, and the first thing that the CEO of actually, no, he was not the CEO of American Express, it was a different talk. He said, if you want to start a financial service today, you're crazy. I mean, who in their right mind would start a financial service today in the current state of regulation? So everything's over-regulated, right? So, and then I sort of presented a kind of a tunnel of opportunity, a light at the end of the tunnel, or hope. But that's what I think. I think that if we want to change, first of all, right, let's think about governments. Who are the government? They are employees, guys. So we choose them to represent us for our interests. I mean, that's a basic concept of democracy and representative democracy. So I am very excited about the opportunities that technology brings with, Santi Series project, Democracy OS, and all these amazing liquid democracy, the possibility of voting real time, and holding government accountable. Why are we held accountable as service providers, as citizens, and why are not public servants held accountable? So we have the opportunity to have this immense amount of pressure from the crowd, from the the customers on the guys that impose things on us. If it doesn't make sense, if it's not valid, if it's crippling our businesses. So sometimes regulation makes sense. I've said many times the regulation is valid, inevitable and valid, and compliance is valuable and also expensive and valuable. So we have to understand that there is an opportunity to influence, and this is why you have to participate in industry. I'm going to Sydney on Monday to spend a week talking about how to change policy, how to influence policy in other parts of the world that really listen, because some parts of the world don't. So we have to go spread the message and really, seriously, try to think about how we can strike a balance between real, genuine concerns, like the protection against crime, terrorism, and other values like privacy, confidentiality, the ability to grow a business, start a business. So it's a question of influencing. And if you sit back and just try to fight against what happens to you, it's not going to help. So we have to influence, we have to move our butts.
Ahora sí, muchísimas gracias, Juan. Un aplauso para Juan. Te dejamos ir.